Have you ever wondered what really goes on behind the scenes of government? How decisions are made that shape your community and your future? Welcome to Govern, the podcast where we take you inside the world of public service, leadership, and the innovation driving local change. Join us as we explore the roles of elected officials, how government operates, and what it takes to create real change. We'll dive into forward-thinking leadership lessons, and how we all can influence the decisions that shape our communities and futures. Thank you for tuning in to Govern with Supervisor Curt Hagman.
Welcome to another episode of Govern. My name is Curt Hagman, the Supervisor of 4th District, San Bernardino County, and I'm here with a good friend and a special guest, Dan Munsey, who is the Director of our Fire District. And first of all, Dan, tell me, I got to be part of that process, which I love to select you, but you were, when we selected you to be Fire Chief, what, 3, 4, 5, how long ago was it?
So it was 2019. You were a much younger man.
Yeah, okay, a long time ago. And I just remember during that interview process, the way we hit it off, because you are all about innovation. And for those who know me, I love technology innovation as well. And so it's a perfect match. You've been wonderful for our fire district. But talk about a little bit about your past and how you got to be our fire chief.
30 years ago, I started as a volunteer in Yucca Valley, and it was a way to give back to my community. But I quickly discovered this is it. This is what I want to do with my life. It's just, to me, it's not a job. It's not even a profession. It's just a calling. And as I progressed through the fire service, I always wanted to give back as much as I could. And I always wanted to do better. As we talk about innovation, one of the things we get confused with sometimes is the outputs of what we're doing versus the outcomes. And I realize that there's certain things that we can do that just feel good, they're outputs. But when we focus on the outcomes that we're doing and we look at the ecosystem of how do we involve the community, how do we involve outside collaborators, we can really do some amazing things. So over the last 30 years, I've been blessed to work almost every rank in the fire district, was a paramedic for almost 20 years, and have been very involved not only in our county, but in the state and national with different associations. As a matter of fact, for 6 years, I led the International Association of Fire Chiefs Technology Council, which has really brought a lot of great innovation back to us. And that common interest that we shared, you've been a great partner in allowing us to do some truly amazing things in this county, where we're now looked at as a national leader with how we're approaching innovation, the integration of technology, focusing on those outcomes that make a difference in our residents and our citizens' lives.
Well, I was going to plug you because I know you've been at the leadership position for nationally on behalf of San Bernardino County Fire, and because your passion for it too. So congratulations for that. Thank you for bringing this into 21st century of firefighting and everything goes along with it, prevention and monitoring and all the rest. We're going to get into a lot of that as we talk about today. But when you came in, it was a department with some issues, both internally, externally for our partners. And so your leadership style coming in, and now it seems like everyone's getting along. Fire's doing great. The departments in the county are all working together. So tell me about your leadership style. How did you get to change the culture?
Sure. First off, our firefighters, clearly the best in the nation. They're busy. People don't know that San Bernardino City, it's amongst the busiest engines in the nation. And our men and women are just very proud of their service and serving at a very high level. The people have always been here. The mindset shifted a little bit in that we needed to be better collaborators, cooperators. We needed to think outside of just what can the fire district do, to instead focus on what can the fire district, the community, allied agencies do together to make a difference. And so when I first started, there was 3 C's that I came with to our organization. When I first started as a fire chief, I should say. The first C is that we're going to be involved in the community. And certainly the fire service has always been involved. We've always been involved. But my philosophy is we can never be involved enough. We are here to serve Mrs. Hernandez, Mrs. Smith. And when we have the opportunity to engage with our community, listen, play with the kids on the fire engine, we're making such a difference, and we're creating those relationships. And with relationships builds trust. The second C that I reinforce is communication. We're going to be as good of communicators as we can from the top down, but also we're going to look for communication from the bottom up. We need our firefighters, we need our mechanics, we need our warehouse men, we need our admin to tell us what do they need to serve on a very high level and to create those communication pathways where they truly feel like their concerns and their ideas come up to the fire chief and is passed on to the board of supervisors so that we can make a difference together. The third C is that collaboration and cooperation. We need to be seen as the big brother to other agencies. We're just a bigger agency. And as we are the big brother, you want to be perceived in a positive way. We are here to help you. If you need us, let us know what your needs are. But we're going to highlight you and your successes. We're not here to take over the world. We're just here to support the county. And this concept is interesting because our fire protection district, serving the biggest county in the world, is also the biggest fire protection district in the world. But there's still a lot of standalone cities that had great fire departments. Ontario, Rancho Cucamonga, Redlands, Chino, Colton, Victorville, Apple Valley, Loma Linda are examples. But as a fire district, if we're only concentrating on our fire district, there's whole chunks of the county that could have been made better if we were synergistic and worked together. So those are the 3 C's that I brought an approach on how do we bring the fire service together? How do we work better together? What initiatives can we do? And with Confire, you mentioned Confire, it's our dispatch center, and it was a JPA. And at the time, San Bernardino County Fire was thinking about starting our own dispatch center. And I really pushed back on that idea. I said, the moment we do that, we will literally be using different radio systems than our cooperators. And how is that creating the synergism? How is that going to create a better response force using all of the available assets in the county? At the end of the day, San Bernardino County is one of the more poor counties in the Southern California. We don't have the public safety resources that other counties have. We have to work together and we have to be innovative. This year, I told our leadership team to stop comparing us to Orange County or LA County. The fact is, Orange County has just as many calls. They're a less complex county. We are in the top 3 disaster counties in the United States. It's beautiful, but with these beautiful views, we had the Cajon Pass, which is obviously the San Andreas Fault. We have snowstorms that all of a sudden come in areas with 10 feet of snow. We have wildfires. We have flooding. We have all these things. So how are we able to respond to this? Run just as many calls as Orange County, but have literally like a third less in our budget. And you have to be synergistic with the other agencies, and you have to be innovative. So how are we innovative when it comes to partnerships and relationships? We're willing to partner with anybody. We sit down with researchers. Right now, we're working with UC San Diego on fire behavioral modeling and adapting the fire behavioral modeling to understand what actions can we take before a fire to limit fire spread. We've worked with Carnegie Mellon University to look at advanced robotics. So we're looking at startup companies, and when we work with startup companies, we're not looking to make money. We're making a product that's going to be very useful for our citizens of San Bernardino. So we have lots of pilot studies. And you're aware of a very big one this year, which was taking a fully autonomized Black Hawk helicopter and taking the pilot out of the loop and have the helicopter fly itself, model fire behavior, get water by itself into a bucket, and drop water on that fire. So constantly looking at innovation to move this county forward.
It's amazing what you're doing with and you did mention we're the largest county. And so talk about the department structure. How many firefighters and personnel? What is your staffing?
So we have close to 850 suppressions of firefighters. All our firefighters are EMTs or paramedics. Most of them are paramedics. And then we have the second largest ambulance company in the county. AMR is the largest provider, mostly in the Valley area. But I think a lot of people don't understand that San Bernardino County Fire has ambulances in the mountain areas, from Crestline, Lake Arrowhead. We have ambulances in our desert areas, Yucca Valley. We have them in Pinion Hills and Wrightwood and Hesperia. So we have a large ambulance. Total size of the fire department is about 1,250. Because we also do the hazmat regulations. I don't think most people know that. We have our own specialized fire mechanics. It's very specific, and a lot of education goes into the systems that are on fire engines that you wouldn't normally see on a diesel truck, like a semi-truck. We have our own warehouses, and a great example of our warehousemen is just this, about a week ago, we had an incident on the I-15 out near Baker, and it was a semi-truck pulling 30,000 pounds of used tires. And that semi-truck caught on fire and shut down the freeway. It's 111 degrees, and there's people out there that drive Teslas. And they plan just enough battery energy to get to Vegas, but now your car's stopped at 111 degrees.
Almost had that the other day coming home from Orange County myself.
Oh, you drive an electric vehicle?
I drive, I had no idea.
I'm just kidding. But now you're thinking about not only that primary impact of that semi-truck, but you just stopped all that traffic, and you have people in electric vehicles that are running out of electricity, people in ICE, what we call ICE is internal combustion engine, normal gasoline or diesels. They're running out of fuel, and it's hot. So our warehouse team literally responded out with trucks of water, and we sent engines and ambulances out there. We gave the water to the CHP officers that were out there helping us, and we went vehicle to vehicle checking on the 11,000 travelers that are caught a huge traffic jam.
A lot of diversity in this county, a lot of different kind of responses. One of the things that you told me way back when, well, first of all, let me talk about the structure too, because I think it's important. You're an independent agency. I'm not your county supervisor. I'm a fire board director. And that's something that is different than like our other public safety sheriff's department, who is a department of the county. You're an independent fire district that gets a little bit money for general fund, but most of it's independent. Your budget is independent. But one of the things I loved about your creativity was we do have a diverse county. We have the mountains, the deserts, the valley, and you were thinking about changing manning at different stations based on seasonal. So when the winter snow comes, you may upload them, or when the fire season comes, you shift them different areas. And I've never heard anything like that from any department. I mean, it's very ingenious to think about watching what happens on a regular basis. Like you said, the modeling and being proactive versus this reactive to certain events. So that's a great concept you had.
It would really surprise everybody how data-driven we are. We are looking at those analytics, and we look and see what time of day are the incidents going to occur, where are they going to occur, what seasons. And a great example would be Wrightwood. In the winter, we're going to have a lot more calls than we are in the summer. And in Lake Arrowhead, it's almost flip-flopped. We have more calls in the summer than the winter. Why is that? Well, Wrightwood has ski resorts. And so a lot of those calls are traumas that are occurring on the ski resorts, where Lake Arrowhead was a big lake. People are going up to Lake Arrowhead to visit in the summer because it's a nice, cool spot to visit. But looking at your trends, understanding your trends, and then basing your deployment off those trends creates a more efficient fire service. And that's something that San Bernardino County Fires really led the way in exploring. And how do we do this? Working with our labor groups to be able to do some of that. And I think more and more over time, you're going to see the fire service follow suit with those models.
That's fantastic. You talked about the 15 a little bit. 15 is such an integral part of our county, but more so for the Western United States. You're telling me how much economics drive through our county each year by leaving ports of Long Beach and LA out to Las Vegas and beyond. And so when it gets shut down, it's a huge impact, not just to the county and those travelers, but also the economy of the Western United States a little bit. And we had an incident not too long ago that is the first, I think, of its kind, at least in our county, where the batteries caught on fire. And kind of explain what happened there.
Sure. So on the I-15 out near Baker again, and I think most of your viewers will understand, as you go out towards Baker, there's very small cluster communities of 10s or 20 houses, but the vast majority of that is federal land. What most people don't understand is the federal government doesn't pay property taxes to the county to provide service or to the fire district. And so what we have is a long distance between Barstow and essentially Baker, where there's no fire services. So when we have an incident on the 15, it takes a long time to gather the resources that you need to mitigate that incident. In this particular case, we had a semi-truck that was pulling 80,000 pounds of a lithium battery in the form of what we call a BESS, a battery energy storage system. And as it was going through the 15, it fell on its side. Well, a lithium-ion battery is very stable, especially a major manufacturer like Tesla builds batteries, very reliable. But when these batteries are damaged, they have the possibility into going into thermal runaway. And what that literally means is the batteries start heating up. And as they're heating up, there's no cooling mechanism. They start off-gassing gas. And then that gas ignites. And as a firefighter, trying to put these batteries out is very difficult. You can control the fires to some extent, but these batteries are so hot, you can't really extinguish them. And so the battery energy storage system, that I'm going to call it the BESS, is on its side. It's off gassing. It catches on fire in the middle of the freeway, and this is very dangerous. And it shut down both north and southbound lanes for almost 32 hours. So the end result is we had to get some heavy wreckers out there and pull this off the road into the middle of the desert, work with Bureau of Land Management to do it. And what most people don't understand is that battery was in thermal runaway for about a week and could not be removed for a couple of months because there's nowhere in California that we can recycle these batteries. So our hazmat team is also on this incident, monitoring this for a couple of months. So we decided we'd go to the county of San Bernardino, went to the Economic Development Division, spoke to Derek Armstrong and said, Derek, we literally had the governor of Nevada calling our team saying, you have to get this road open for the casinos. I said, I remember my whole career, I've heard a metric that when we shut down the freeway for 1 hour, it's $1 million. That's got to be 20 years old. What is it today? So they hired a firm to come in and study this. And what was found so far, it's in drafts preliminary, is that freeway, the 15, is about $1.5 billion of economic benefit to Southern California. Every hour, it's $2.5 million of economic benefit. And so it's tremendously important, not only to San Bernardino County, but these other counties, these other states around us. Most people don't understand that when our goods come into one of our ports, Long Beach, Los Angeles, San Diego, the way it's distributed to these other states is through the I-15 because you can't get through the Sierras easily.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think your partnerships are so important that you keep on that. I know that you're working hard with the federal government to get the resources because it's not a San Bernardino County resource. It's a Southern California resource to keep our roads open. So we're supporting on that. I know our federal delegation is also very supportive of that. So we'll keep working on that. Two favorite subjects, innovation, because you and I talk about that a lot with the diverse landscape we have with different things. And I always am curious, what's the percentage of calls for medical versus other, I guess, fires, emergencies, wrecks, that kind of thing. And how do you, what's the future look like there? How do you allocate your resources being you're basically the CEO of the fire district. So you can see your budget, short-term, long-term. There's a lot going to there, but what's the plans for San Bernardino County Fire going forward, especially on the innovation front?
So about 70% of our 150,000 responses per year are medical related. So several years ago, working with the county was able to give us funds to put nurses in our dispatch center. And where this is important is we looked at our data and we worked with the hospitals and looked at the hospital data and the fire department, the dispatch data. We determined that somewhere between 12 to 15% of the 911 callers, they didn't need to go to the emergency room. Now, the hospital is really interested in this too, because the emergency rooms in Southern California are very full. There's just more patients than the emergency rooms can process. And the hospital is also looking at insurance, Med-Cal, Medicare, and they may not be paid for some of these visits. So as we looked at that data and said, well, 12, 15% don't go to the hospital, what do we do with these 911 callers? California law is changing now, but at the time it said that if you send an ambulance to an emergency, that ambulance can only go to an emergency room. You couldn't take the patient care to their doctor's office, couldn't take it to the urgent care. You still can't, but we're working on that. So how do we take these 12% of these callers and what do we do with them? And so putting nurses in the dispatch center allowed us to go through a dispatch protocol, what we call priority medical dispatching. As you call 911, the dispatcher is asking a series of questions to you. And the longer you're on the phone with the dispatcher, the less likely it is to be an emergency. For instance, the first question may be, is the patient breathing? Is the patient moving? And if the answer is no, you have a true emergency. But if you were to answer yes, and then the next question is, are they experiencing any pain? No, they're not. And as you're asking more and more questions and it's a lower grade emergency, we can safely take these patients and transfer them to the nurses. And then the nurses work with the patient. Sometimes it may work with the insurance companies to determine where does this patient need to go? Is this maybe it's a behavioral health issue and they needed to get into some sort of counseling or therapist, or they need to be connected to some of the resources that are built through the county for those type of issues.
Well, same thing we're looking at for everybody else, like telemedicine now.
Right.
The ability to get a doctor 24/7 to get a prescription or to give you advice, whatever. It is the modern way. I know we've been working closely together trying to get that new system up and running. There's a lot of blockages in legislation and special interest groups that don't necessarily want to see the progression of smart medicine, I would call it. But I know San Bernardino County Fire is taking the lead on that, and I think we'll do some breakthroughs here.
So what we did is we did it as a region. We brought in all the fire departments together through our Confire JPA, and it is leading in California. It is leading across. There's like three, when we started, there's only like three other places that were doing this. It is really hard. It's really complicated because of the amount of interest. And that's with innovation, what seems easy can be very difficult. And you're a proponent for telemedicine and how do we connect the patients immediately to a doctor? And we've been testing some of those devices to do that. But we also have to understand, how is a hospital going to make money? Are they able to build this through the insurance? How do we offset the cost for this new technology? So it takes a lot of careful planning to get there. Moving forward in the future, though, we're still looking at the 150,000 responses we have as preventable, and most of these are to some degree. And my job, while we have the best firefighters in the world, our job isn't to respond to these emergencies. Our number one job is to prevent these emergencies. And only when we fail at that, we're going to be really good at responding. So one of the issues that I think might be good to talk about is the approach on how are we going to prevent wildland fires in San Bernardino. That's a huge threat. During the 4th of July, we were typically going to run about 250 wildland fires caused by fireworks. So are some of those fires preventable? And I think, if you would allow me to talk about it, is a little bit on that wildland management and what we're doing.
Well, absolutely. I think it's important for us. It's been everyone saw the news, what happened in Pacific Palisades and Altadena, and we had the fires in LA. And I was SCAG president at the time. We had a report from LA. And they basically talked about how fast they want to recover. Spent very little. Why did it happen? And they go, and I know a lot of people talk about climate change and this and that, but these neighborhoods were there for 100 years, and we went through other fires. And so what was lacking in that report, I think, was the fueling and modification, what we can do both as a government and residents to harden our homes and to build fire breaks. And I know there's been a lot of environmental rules coming down, stopping for some of the things. I went on when my first term as supervisor, I went with the department to go do a controlled burn. Got all set up, ready to go to take out this area that burns every year. And we got called off by AQMD, which I also said on. So navigating the different state environmental rules, the environmentalists, but to do the prep work, for me, that was the conclusion I came out with. And I'd love to hear your perspective because I'm working with the insurance companies and others, because homeowner insurance is a really big issue right now for affordable home insurance or just have it. And we need to be a partnership with our communities, our cities, and the insurance companies to lessen that threat. You got the largest county, you have both urban and rural. What is your take on all this?
I recently testified in front of Congress on federal lands, and the opening remarks from the congressional members were how bad the Palisades and Eaton wildfires were, and fire insurance, and how everybody's fire insurance is getting canceled. And we have a wildfire crisis, and we have a fire insurance crisis. And I was thinking about San Bernardino County, and in our zip codes, we're amongst the most canceled fire insurance in California. And we've had large wildfires just last year. We had the line fire that burned 50,000 acres. We had the bridge fire that burned from LA County 50,000 acres into Wrightwood and Mount Baldy. We're affected by these things. But as I started my remarks, I said that there's lies that we tell in the fire service that we believe is true. There's lies that we tell as citizens that we believe are true, but they're in fact not true. And so what I said is the Palisades and Eaton fire, the first lie is that these were really bad wildfires. And it's a lie because the truth is these are urban conflagrations. This is house-to-house propagation of fire that's moving through a built environment. Sure, there's a small wildland component, and wildland transition from fire in the wildland transition into the community could have been prevented to some degree by fire breaks. And there's great modeling that we're doing right now that is looking in retrospect that if some of these fuel breaks had been completed that were held up due to litigation, how much less damage would have occurred. And it's just tremendous. The second lie that we often tell as truths is that there's a fire insurance crisis in California. There's not a fire insurance crisis. And I know that's surprising because we have so many of our residents that are on the FAIR plan, and it's not fair. The fact is, though, it's not a fire insurance crisis. Houses burning down is the crisis. And so as long as houses burn down and the insurance industry can't self-regulate, then they have no other option than to cancel insurance. So we have to keep these fires from burning down. A third lie that I see that we call as truths is that we have a large wildland fire crisis in the United States. And I don't think we have a wildland fire crisis. We have a wildland management crisis. If we manage the wildland, then our fires can be less frequent and smaller. At the end of the day, we haven't been able to manage our wildland. And your controlled burn is a great example. A QMD on a good day will only allow us to burn 30 acres per day. Well, we have projects planned for upwards to 1,000 acres that would drastically reduce risk to our communities and allow these communities to have affordable insurance. But how many days is it going to take me to burn if I can only burn 30 acres a day? And there's only certain days that I can burn. Yet the reality is these areas are going to burn in some cases, like Little Mountain or Paris Hills. They're going to burn every single year. And it's going to happen on a day that isn't good for air quality, and it's not good for us managing.
That was my point because I said on South Coast, and I bring this up too. We try and control these minute differences in businesses and in controlled burn stuff. But when the fire comes, we have zero control. And that 1 week of burn or 2 weeks of burn sets us back for 3 years of everything we try to prevent.
Right.
So it's that practicality of making things happen and being realist about what we need to do to manage, like you said, our open sectors and to build that house that sits between the neighborhood and the open space. That becomes your first point of defense. If that's not protected, then the rest are not protected. And talking with the insurance companies, they're willing to work. Unfortunately, they're not giving us the secret models, how they do the models yet. But we were talking about a resilience finance district. So there's steady money that comes from a small portion of property tax. Maybe you pay $100 more a year on your property tax. But for that neighborhood has looked at a specific plan to counteract field modification, not just for fires, but what is it going to be doing, prevent flooding or whatever that neighborhood needs to build an ongoing maintenance plan to prevent the things from happening in the first place. So that's our discussions going in SCAG and see if we could get some modeling. They're looking at San Bernardino County to be the first test places for these, one in the mountains, one in the desert, one in the valley, which may be good for us to do.
So we're working with SB COG and have been sharing a lot of our approach. And our approach is I went to all 5 of the board members and I asked for some seed money to do a master plan over the entire county. So much bigger than just the fire district, but overlay the federal area, the state letter, the tribal area, the local city, unincorporated areas as well, to come together and prioritize the fuel mitigations. Because what's happening now is the state will do a fuel treatment, and the feds will do treatment over here, and the local government will do treatment, but none of it makes sense. And so let's prioritize the fuel management. And then the regulatory environment, study the regulatory environment. How do we meet the CEQA, the NEQA, the NEPA, and these other rules and regulations we have in order to make these mitigations that matter? Third, look at the maintenance that's required over time. In 2000 to 2011, we removed 1.1 million bark beetle trees. You'll remember this from the county. So there was incredible thinning of our forests, but we didn't maintain it. So what's the maintenance schedule look like? And then how do we drive the grants and the funding to get there?
Well, how do we keep it ongoing if there are grants there too? So I think there's more to come on this, but it's been fascinating for you from the policy perspective to realize how many things California has put in there blocking for us to do things to help our residents. And I think it's at least try to look at what the outcomes are. Hopefully, it's at the forefront of the attention for our legislators, for our partners in the federal government, for our open spaces that, hey, we need to change. We can't keep doing what we're doing. Because when it comes out, I mean, look at billions and hundreds of billions of dollars of damage in LA now for something that could have been maybe mitigated for tens of millions on an annual basis. And hopefully we get smart about that and we're able to do it. I know you're taking a leadership for San Bernardino County on that. So thank you for that. Fun part, innovation. What is the innovation in fire? I know we're talking drones and autonomous vehicles and the autonomous Blackhawk, but what is the future of firefighting?
Well, this year there's two things. What I often talk about is a lot of what we can do in our civilian life, we can't do as firefighters. And so one of the initiatives we have today is track our firefighters on the fire ground so that as they enter a building or in the wildland, we know where they are in relationship to the actual fire. And I know that sounds crazy because I always say my wife's been tracking me since 2011 with his friends and family, right? But we don't do that in the fire service. So we're instituting firefighter tracking. The second thing we're looking at is our biometrics. We want to know the health and wellness of our firefighters while they're fighting fire and when they're not fighting fire. We want them to have their medical information so that they can go get the help they need because too many firefighters die from cancer, cardiac, respiratory illnesses. We want to be preventive in that. Now, as you know where your firefighters are, you want to know where they are in relationship to the building or the wildfire. So I'll take drones. A lot of agencies are spending a lot of time. They take a firefighter out of the firefight and they hand them a control box and they fly first person view. So they have a drone and the drone is streaming to their remote control and they're watching this screen. But the problem is, number one, they took a firefighter out of the firefight. The second is, while this firefighter has this information, it's not visually available to everybody else, and he or she is trying to talk on the radio to communicate. So in San Bernardino, we're moving past that. Specifically in San Bernardino City, we're putting radar in the city, which will allow us to fly the drones beyond visual line of sight to get to another FAA certification, to be able to fly at a higher elevation and to safely integrate with and have airspace deconfliction so that we can safely operate with the helicopters like the sheriff's helicopter program with the international airport here. In Hesperia, and so these drones that we're going to fly into San Bernardino are literally in a box. They're charged. And as a call comes in based on the call type, our vision is these UAS, the drones, are going to automatically lift, autonomously fly without a pilot to that location and then go to a pattern. And our firefighters, using a common operating picture, and San Bernardino County was one of the first innovators with common operating pictures in the fire service, they'll simply be able to touch the screen and be able to visualize what that drone is seeing and then take control of what we call a gimbal, which is at the bottom of a drone or the top. There's an attachment that allows sensors to swivel. So it might be a visual camera, it might be infrared, could be LiDAR, but take control of that gimbal and select what kind of sensor you want and stream it back. So that'll allow us to see what a fire is before we get there. Maybe we can see victims that are in the building, that are in the windows, and we can immediately send the fire engine there to put ladders. On the wildland side, it becomes very complicated as you're flying with air tankers, both the fixed wing and the rotor wings. And that airspace where you normally fly a drone, you're going to have helicopters coming in and dropping water. You're going to have aircraft that are going to come down. So deconflicting that airspace is a little more complicated. So our plan is to move into what we call SASA, which is Sustained Aerial Situational Awareness. And this is aircraft that can fly 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So we're working on a project with an aircraft that can fly 80 hours. And as it's coming down, another one will go up. And you're doing it as autonomous as you can. And you're using that aircraft to look for risks and hazards before the emergency occurs. And the example I give is looking at a railroad track and you see a car that's stopped on the railroad track and a train is coming. Well, before the train hits that car, can we take action to move that car off the railroad track? Or if that train is in an accident, is it upright? Is it leaking fluids? Is it hazardous materials?
Gives you real-time awareness.
And if it's hazardous materials, let's evacuate now versus waiting for a fire engine to arrive. So we have several different aerial drones. We look at kind of a taxonomy of robotics as a whole. We have our aerial drones, and there's 5 use cases. Using them to suppress wildfires. So the Rain Black Hawk helicopter is a good example of suppression, but we're also looking at smaller helicopters that swarm to a fire. So there's a fire on Little Mountain, and there's these drones that are positioned. As soon as that fire occurs, they're swarming to that little mountain. We use it for logistics. Right now, if there's a fire on a hillside, we may have 20 firefighters carrying hose up and down the hill. Well, drones now have the ability to pick up hoses and deliver.
Heavy lift drones, yeah.
Heavy lift drones. We look at it as communication to be able to extend our data communications. And we look at it as, how do we get better situational awareness by using cameras on these fires? Then we look at ground robotics, and we have 2 quadrupeds. They look like dogs that have been ordered. And these have the ability to determine if there's explosives presence, if it's a toxic atmosphere. They have the ability to walk into a building and using LiDAR, immediately give you a 3D representation of a building. This is really important if you have a collapsing building. Instead of sending firefighters into a collapsed building, now you can send the robotic dog in, get the imagery, determine what kind of tools you need with the structural engineers to shore up that building. And then we also have an aquatic, you don't even know about this, we have an aquatic drone that's coming from Seattle Fire. And I found out Seattle Fire had purchased 2 of these drones, and they were only using 1. So I reached out and asked for the second, and they're sending it to us. And our vision is on our lakes and rivers. Most people don't know how many fireboats we have. We have a boat in Needles, in Havasu. We have in Lake Arrowhead. We have an icebreaker on Big Bear Lake. Because in the winter, people go out and play on the ice and they fall through. But people may not realize the amount of drownings we have, especially in the Havasu, Colorado River. And I remember as a young firefighter, I was probably 21 years old, up at Santa's Village on Ladybug Lake. We had a 7-year-old nephew and his uncle fall through the ice. And as a paramedic, I arrived and I wanted to treat the patients. The problem is they're submerged, and we waited for scuba divers to come pull the individuals out of the lake. Now, it's cold water immersion, and with cold water, you could be viable for a couple of hours. So I got the uncle, and I transported him, treated him. Unfortunately, he passed, but I always thought, what if we had taken them out of the lake sooner? So the aquatic drones, what we want to do is put these on our boats and put them into the water as soon as there's a drowning, to be able to go find these victims and bring them to the surface so that we can hopefully save more lives. So we're doing a lot with robotics.
It's really fascinating to have a 80-hour aircraft that can fly above and spot early breaks of fires, or if things change. The few fires I've been with you on in San Bernardino County, they have that situational awareness, where to send resources and how to respond. So it's a combination of, like you said, preventing these things from happening. And we're working hard to fuel modify and to fire breaks and do things to help protect our neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
But also then when you do have to respond, get the earliest jump you can on something by having that situational awareness by technology, and then having the professionals that respond quickly.
So we speak on this a little longer. So our vision in the county when it comes to wildfire, the metric that most of California uses and has for like 100 years is we're going to keep wildfires 10 square acres or less 90% of the time. 10 square acres or less 90% of the time. What I've questioned is, what about the other 10% of the time when these fires are going to 50,000 acres and burning down houses? So our new metric is we're going to keep wildfires 10 square feet or less 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And I was challenged by President Biden's Council on Science Technology. There was a NASA astronaut, retired NASA astronaut, who was leading it. Laura, she said, "Chief Munsey, don't you think that's unrealistic?" And I said, well, Laura, what did NASA think when JFK got in front of the nation and said we're going to put a man on the moon? If you don't have a big vision, you're not going to achieve a better standard. Now, the key is, how are we going to do it? So another innovation that we have, supervisors, we're working on an early detection system. So we're partnered with a startup called the Fire Neural Network, and they've put lightning rods at our fire stations to detect where lightning is. And lightning is one of those primary starts of wildfire. If a lightning bolt hits in its receptive fuel bed, it may smolder for days and no one will see smoke. And then the fire will occur. So with this, now we can determine where did the lightning strike occur within like 5 meters, and then look at the fuel modeling. Is that a receptive fuel bed? And then hopefully use aircraft that even the larger
drones. Yeah.
We're partnering them with the camera system that most people are familiar with so that we can focus on where we think the lightning strikes are. And we're about to enter an agreement with a satellite company that's putting satellites up for early detection. And what we're doing is we're taking these pieces and we're combining them into one contract to look at early detection for wildfire. Because we can't detect the wildfire when it's incipient or just smoldering before it becomes flame. We'll never be able to get to that 10 square feet or less vision. Then the second, so early detection. The second is early response, and that is using robotics to fly and suppress these fires. Keep them in control until the firefighters can get there. It can take a long time for our firefighters in their brush engines to drive off-road and reach some of these places. We keep those fires in check, we're going to keep our wildfires small. Now, that does not replace good wildland management. We do need to do more controlled burning. Recently, I went on a podcast called Hotshot Wake Up, and we were talking about managed fires. And what managed fires is a fire, maybe it's a lightning that occurs and it starts a fire. There's some in the industry, some people I guess in the civilian world that look at that and say, well, that could be good fire. Why don't you just let it burn? And I disagree with it. We need to suppress all wildfires. Instead, we need to have the ability to control fire. Let's get the resources there. Let's create the fuel barriers. Let's manage this fire when we have all the resources there. But if we just wait for a fire to occur and then burn, we don't have our resources there. We may have plenty of resources today when we're in preparedness level 3, but as that preparedness level, as more and more fires occur and resources become more scarce, we may not be able to manage this fire. That is exactly what occurred in the Grand Canyon 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago when the Grand Canyon Lodge got burned down. That was a managed fire that was allowed to burn. They're in preparedness level 3 and they went to preparedness level 4. And there's a lot of factors that led to that fire growth. You can't do that because you lose public trust. So how are we going to manage it? One last point, and I know I'm talking a lot, but with the large aircraft that we're looking at to fly 24/7, we're partnering with UC San Diego to improve the fuel fire modeling that they do. But we've also asked them if they have an economist on staff to do research on what happens when we're flying this aircraft and we can do fire modeling on areas that don't have a fire yet. But then we look and we start making decisions about where we're going to apply our money to minimize that fire growth. And what are the economic benefits of doing this? Because if you're suppressing the fires quickly, if you're keeping them in check, well, there's no smoke in the air. And if there's no smoke in the air, funding starts drying up. You need to look at the economic benefits of cost avoidance. If we prevent this fire from occurring, then we don't have the loss that's occurring from the amount of money it takes, the millions of dollars it takes to fight these fires, but also the economic loss that occurs.
Absolutely. I mean, LA is a good example.
It's a great example.
Yeah, how much, and just, how these poor families lose everything they have in there because it wasn't mitigated very well. Last section, what can we as individual residents do to help protect our homes and be better residents, I guess?
So I mentioned the Eaton Fire in the Palisades. Understand that there's certain parts in this county, and I won't name them, but that it's very dangerous because of individual homeowners who aren't maintaining their property. So the fire district is working with code enforcement, land use services to do better abatement. And so when we go out and do an inspection, what we would love to find is that our residents have already maintained their homes. There's lots of information on our website, sbcfire.org, which is San Bernardino County Fire.org, CAL FIRE's website, U.S. Forest Service website, on what does good look like. Specifically, just Google Zone Zero. And we would really like to see our neighborhoods with a Zone Zero concept, which means there's 3 zones around the house. And that first zone is 0 to 5 feet away from the house. There is no vegetation. It's just bare mineral soil or it's rock. This is very hard to understand, but even no rose bushes, nothing. The Eaton Palisades could have been prevented with better individual land management and home hardening. Your point is we could have spent millions of dollars home hardening versus billions of dollars on economic loss and the loss of these houses. What do we need? Well, no fences, no wood fences next to the house. It needs to be blocker. It needs to be chain link. We need roofs that are not combustible. We need screens that have less than a 1/4 inch grate on it to keep the embers from going inside the attic. On the Palisades fire, there's videos from inside houses of embers blowing through the cat and dog door, igniting the inside of the house on fire. So we need to be thinking about those things to prevent houses from burning down on the local level. We love hearing from our residents. They can always go to our website. We have information boxes on there that they can fill out. We're happy to send our firefighters to their houses to do the assessments, to work with the homeowners on determine a proactive approach to keep their houses safe. We need to do this in San Bernardino if we expect to have affordable insurance. We are really working hard on keeping houses from burning down. We're really working hard on bringing lots of agencies together to look at land management. I love this idea of how do we get constant funding for land management? Is that through property tax? In Sonoma and in Marin, all the cities and county unincorporated incorporated areas came together and did a 1/2-cent sales tax with the money specifically going towards prevention. And if we do that, I think that we're going to continue to have a great place to live, a fire-safe community, resilient from floods and other natural disasters. And it'll have a lower cost of living, which I think has been really attractive in our beautiful county.
A lot of things for us to do, but you've made so many great strides, I guess, for 6 years. Time flies back really fast.
Right at COVID right in the middle.
Yeah, yeah. Appreciate everything you're doing. We're very proud to have you as our fire chief, and keep doing the great work, and keep leading the country as far as innovation on this front. And there's a lot more work we need to work together on. Thank you for watching this episode of Govern. I'm very pleased to have Chief Munsey here explaining about the fire district and everything it's doing and continue to do in the future of San Bernardino County Fire. And stay tuned for our next episode of Govern.
We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found some valuable insights. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, remember that your voice matters in government.